What's up, everybody? Chucklehead Renaissance here. I'm back with my series covering all the iterations of TMNT. This is the second episode in which we'll be covering the second part of the Mirage comics, often known as Mirage Volume 2. Before we get into it, I just wanted to note something that I forgot to mention last time because, in all honesty, it wasn't really relevant, being that the comics are black and white. But the original Mirage Turtles all wore red headbands. The multicolored headbands was something created by the cartoon. And so here you'll see, because these issues in particular are in full color, that they all have red headbands. And so the easiest way to tell them apart is just by looking at what weapons they're carrying. But without further ado, let's get into this second part of the history of TMNT with Mirage Comics Volume 2. So, as I've mentioned a bit, the special thing about Volume 2 is that it's written by Jim Lawson. So, this is the only main continuity, non side story stuff that's not written by either Eastman or Laird. But Lawson has been with Eastman and Laird for a long time at this point, even helping write on City at War. So these issues don't really feel that different than something Eastman or Laird would write. The other notable thing about these issues is that they were originally done in color. I've shown you guys color issues for some of these things because that's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles classics coming in color, but the color was added to those later on. Whereas here, the issues were made with color in mind, which I do think gives them a unique visual style. And they're a lot brighter and more saturated than all the other Mirage stuff. And then I think the final thing of note about this is that this is the shortest portion of the story, being only 13 issues. Volume 1, even excluding the guest issues, still had 39 issues. 4 or 5 if you count the Fugitoid micro-series, 7 TMNT tales, and numerous backup and short stories. Volume 4 had 32 main issues, 4 4-issue miniseries surrounding each turtle, and a whopping 71 tales. But that doesn't mean a lot doesn't happen in these issues, and they're still a lot of fun. So let's get into them. Dawn brings Splinter tea. We see that they're still living in the cave in Northampton. Splinter says that they should go to the Tory Gate today, which I assume they set up, as he had a vision last night. He can't reveal the details, but he wants more knowledge about what he saw. They arrive at the gate, and they begin meditating. Dawn has a vision about walking through a bamboo forest, where he happens upon a small village. A flying car passes overhead, so we know that this is the future. When Dawn comes to, he tells Splinter about the village, noting it was near Mount Fuji in Japan. Splinter says that this was his home village, Chihaya, and he says that Dawn will end up there to ultimately bury Splinter. At least we know with that implication that Splinter will still be around for a while. We now go to Casey. He has another one of those nightmares about the demon Casey baby, who says he took Gabe and now he's returned for Casey. Casey wakes up in a panic and immediately runs to Shadow's room to check and make sure that she's okay. April asks Casey if he's okay, and he tells her that he had a nightmare. April says that she did as well, where she was chased by mousers and then saved by a cyborg stockman. They blame the pizza that they ate, and Casey throws the last piece away. So, yes, in Mirage, pizza brings nothing good. We also see one of the turtles is in the kitchen. Raph is wandering around the sewers. He kills this rat, which then returns as a huge monster and knocks him through a wall. He's grabbed by a Triceraton and put on a gurney, and we see that they already have Leo. There's another alien who puts some device on Raph's head and then gives Leo an injection. Then suddenly we cut to credits and it says it's Michelangelo production. And it was on TV. And a turtle, who I assume is Mike, turns it off. So yeah, that was issue 1. I'm not sure how much really happened and how much was just a production. That ending was really weird and kind of threw me off, especially now with the series largely being more serious at City at War. But luckily it was a one-time thing, and I think really the only things that didn't happen were what happened at the end with Raph and Leo, and I think those were just kind of a little stinger. But one thing I do like about this is how it foreshadows a lot of the future plots that are going to come up in Volume 2. So now the story really begins with issue 2. Leo, Raph, and Mike are living in the basement of April and Casey's apartment building, but it's cramped, and they're getting tired of each other. Also starting here, and in Volume 4 especially, Mike and Don are sometimes called Mikey and Donnie, But Mirage never fully makes the switch. As I said before, I do think Mikey and Donnie are more fitting names, but for consistency's sake, I'm still going to stick with Mike and Don for this video. And I'll switch to Mikey and Donnie for any of the upcoming versions. We then find out that Mike has a journal, and he can predict Raph's moods and actions exactly. First, hate everything. Next, hate everything and be openly aggressive. Finally, go off sulking by himself. Raph gets annoyed and declares that he's moving out. Mike and Leo talk, and we find out that Leo also wants to move out. While he appreciates what April and Casey have done for them by giving them the basement, the place is too cramped, and they have to sneak around constantly due to the other tenants. We then see a secret facility that's owned by a group called D.A.R.P.A, which stands for the Defense and Research Projects Administration, and it's somewhere in the southwestern United States. A soldier uses an ID card to enter a room. He approaches another guard who is seriously on edge. He's spooked by the person that they're guarding, and he saw a body being dragged into the room not long ago. They start looking for a third guard who's supposed to be there when they hear a gunshot inside the lab that they're guarding. They enter and find odd machines, and there's a dead guard with a wound in his chest. They call for backup, but a machine gun pops out and kills both of them. We see a man with an ID card, probably stolen from the first murdered guard, hacking into the facility's system. He turns off the alarm and seals the lab. The missing guard returns and tries to enter the sealed lab, obviously to no avail. Back in Northampton, Don is digging in the farmhouse's yard when a car pulls up, so Don leaps to hide. The eagle-eyed guests saw him, though, and try to get him to come out. Luckily, they were just Jehovah's Witnesses, and they leave pamphlets. Leo runs on the rooftops, and he laments how the turtles are growing apart. He wonders if the only thing keeping them together was the war with the Foot. Or maybe they are just growing apart as they grow older. He then hears gunshots, and he looks out on the street where a drive-by just happened. Leo jumps onto the car, and we see there are two people in it. They try to shake him off, but as he keeps fighting with them, they ultimately crash into a pole. Leo and the driver are sent flying. The car is on fire, and it seems as if they're both dead. Leo goes back to the roof and sees cops arrive at the scene, where there's a dead body laying on the sidewalk. This causes Leo to go on some existential rant about destiny, order versus chaos, and his ability to lead. I mean, to be fair, that was a ton of crazy stuff that just happened. Back at D.A.R.P.A, we see the man who hacked the system and murdered the guards is Baxter Stockman, making his first appearance since issue 2. He seems to be preparing to remove his own brain and place it into a robot. Eventually, a group of armed guards are able to break into the lockdown lab, and they find their 3 dead colleagues, and they start looking for Stockman. One guard finds his lifeless body, and we see that his brain has now since been removed. And then he's killed by the Stockman robot quickly. Stockman then ejects a gun from his wrist and kills the rest of the guards before taking off the glasses of his old body and putting them in some compartment and leaving the lab. Raph walks into a room and he starts looking around. He pulls the covering off a gargoyle, telling it not to come to life. This is a reference to a crossover the Turtles had with another comic book character called Savage Dragon, who is a character created by Image Comics founder Erik Larsen. In the story, the Turtles and Savage Dragon fought a living gargoyle. Raph walks by a cross and opens up a window, and we see that he's inside an abandoned cathedral, which he plans to make his new lair. In Northampton, Don is cooking in the farmhouse, but a police cruiser pulls up to the home. Once again, Don has to leave. The cop, who you may or may not recognize, as we rarely see him out of his costume, is nobody. He enters the farmhouse through the window and looks around. He finds the dishes and steaming food. So he radios in, and he says that he scared off whoever was there. He's told that the house belongs to an Arnold Jones. We meet 2 of Casey and April's tenants, Mr. Bronze and Miss Tillett. They talk, and Miss Tillett is judgy, upset about higher rent and the fact that the couple with a kid is living together and not married. Mr. Bronze nicely tells her to shove it. Leo and Mike walk through the sewers, and Leo finds what he believes to be a great place for a new lair. Mike tells Leo that he plans to stay in Casey and April's building, as he wants to be close to Shadow, and he says that Casey's going to knock down a wall to give him easier access to the sewers. He's sad that they're all splitting up, but Leo points out that they're getting older, and it's natural that they'd want their own spaces. We then go back to the Stockman bot, who's walking underwater, and we see a ship pass over him. He activates some GPS system, as he's heading somewhere. Nobody returns to the woods, and he sets up his telescope to observe the farmhouse. Don approaches him and they fight, but Don obviously wins. Nobody then tells Don who he is, stating that he recently moved from Springfield to Northampton to join the force here. So Northampton and Springfield are very close together, so this isn't a huge change other than the fact that he's working in a much smaller town now. He explains that he got called to the house and found signs of an intruder and figured it must be the Turtles when he was told it was Casey's house. He brought the telescope to verify, as he knew that if he got close it would spook them again. Don tells him that he's the only one there, though, and takes him back to the house to explain the full story. Leo's wandering around the sewers when a weird fish creature of the Black Lagoon thing pops out of the water and attacks him, and actually knocks him out. He also drops one of his swords. When Leo comes to, he's stuck to a wall by some sticky material. And we also see a giant snapping turtle pop out of the water suddenly. There's a lot of weird stuff that happens in Volume 2, and almost none of it is explained. Knowing that he's in danger, Leo struggles against the sticky material, only for the whole section of the wall to collapse instead of pulling out of the sticky material. Leo falls in the water and tries to get free, but he doesn't until the wall hits the ground. The turtle is closing in on Leo, but he slashes its eye, which gives him enough time to escape to the surface. Unfortunately, the turtle follows him and continues to chase after him. Leo sees a wooden beam, which he kicks, causing debris to fall on it and seemingly kill it. As he tries to leave, he's cut off by the fish creature again. Leo fights the creature, but once again she is too much for him, so he creates distance and slashes her, which seems not to do much damage. She grabs Leo, but he finally lands some blows, so the creature flees. Leo pursues her, and when he doesn't feel any pain after tripping, he realizes that the stuff he was stuck to the wall by must have been some kind of nerve-deadening toxin. Suddenly, he hears something, and the giant turtle crashes through the wall, having survived apparently. Mike, Casey, and Raph go to Leo's lair, and they're looking for him. Raph is sad about splitting up, even though he was the first to leave, and Casey immediately goes to the fridge. Mike notes that Leo has changed and seems to be more easygoing now, talking about chaos and being the natural order of the universe. Ain't that the truth? Casey hands out drinks that he got from the fridge, and they keep talking when they hear an explosion and they go to check it out. Back with Leo, he's running from the giant turtle, and he jumps through a pipe and slides down into a pile of garbage. He feels a large amount of heat and uncovers a giant egg. The fish monster pops out aggressively. Leo threatens the egg, which works and causes her to hesitate. Leo is going to destroy the egg, but the others find him and talk Leo down. Suddenly, the giant turtle crashes through the ceiling. The fish creature runs to protect her egg, and Leo jumps out of the way. The others help Leo up. The turtle crashes and once again appears to be dead. We see the fish creature successfully saved her egg, though. Nearby, Stockman pops out of the water on the shores of New York City now. Stockman kills some guy in a phone booth who was begging to be given the cover of something. He then grabs the phone book and looks through it, declaring that he's returned for someone. We see April leaving her and Casey's apartment to go shopping. The whole gang is there, and we see that Shadow has aged quite a bit, and now looking more like a toddler than a baby. April is about to pull out of the apartment when Stockman bursts out of the street and flips her car. He rips April out of the car and pricks her with this large needle. He tells her that he came back for her and plans to inflict more pain on her as he leaves through the hole in the ground that he created. Something I haven't mentioned yet is that Stockman can dynamically change his form, and it gives the fight scenes with him a lot of variety, as it can produce so many different weapons and attack in a variety of different ways. I know it's not the most original concept, but I'm mostly here for the fights, so I like it. The Turtles and Casey hear the sirens outside, and Casey looks out the window and sees the carnage, so he runs to find April. He finds her, and she's receiving medical care. Leo stays behind with Shadow, while Raph and Mike head out into the sewers to check out what's going on. They find the massive hole in the street that Stockman left. The police interview April, and obviously don't believe her story, which, as you can imagine, Casey feels is completely reasonable, and he doesn't fly off the handle at all. Another cop says that the witness accounts corroborate her story, though. We then see some G-men, Agent Friskas and Lowell, arrive and start swinging their big federal dicks around, and they interview April about what happened themselves. Casey eventually tells them off, saying that they can get info from the police report, and they leave. They go back to their car, but they plan to stake out Casey and April's place and run background checks on them, wanting to know why the robot contacted April specifically. The Turtles eavesdrop on the cops' conversation, but leave when they plan to inspect the hole that the Turtles are standing in. Mike wonders if it's a foot bot, and Raph agrees, but points out that the foot usually attack them, so it would be weird for them to go after April. Mike then brings up the truce with Karai. They find hydraulic fluid on the ground and they investigate it. Then they hear a sound, and they head in that direction. But they're soon cut off by a cave-in, so they turn back. Raph wonders what they're up against, and we see Stockman on the other side of the debris. Casey looks at April's wound, which luckily doesn't look very severe. He tells her to go and rest, and goes to make her some tea. Leo asks about what's going on, but Casey is mostly in the dark as well, so they speculate. Casey suggests the foot, but Leo says it's too public. Mike and Raph get back and tell them that they found nothing. They just know that the robot is in the sewers. Casey says that he's going to try to convince April to go stay with his aunt for a while. We see a car outside of Casey and April's place with G-Men watching them, but it's soon attacked by a masked assailant. He takes out both agents and grabs and opens some briefcase, reading some of the documents inside. The assailant eventually removes his mask, and we see it's Casey, who simply exclaims, "Stockman!" April and Shadow do go with Casey's aunt, and Casey heads back into the apartment and tells them that the robot is involved with Stockman. So they don't know that Stockman is the robot as of yet. They just think that Stockman is controlling the robot. Without much of a plan, they decide to wait for him to strike again. We then see a news report that talks about someone is shooting a building at regular intervals, which is causing them to have to evacuate the building. The bullet holes spell out a message, though. It says, "April, I'm coming for you tonight." The SWAT team goes to find a perp, but they only find a lone machine gun and realize it was being controlled remotely. The Turtles and Casey decide to go there, and they split up to go searching. They're careful to avoid the cops, though. Mike and Leo head in one direction and Raph and Casey in the other. Mike and Leo find the robot, who tells them that he is, in fact, Stockman, not just being controlled by Stockman, and he plans to kill them and April. The robot beats them, but Casey and Raph soon arrive to back them up. Raph throws one of his sai, but it does nothing, and Stockman picks it up and breaks it. He throws the hilt, which hits Casey in the head, dazing him. Raph is continuing to fight, but ultimately he throws Raph and prepares to kill him. Just then, though, Don and Nobody arrive. Stockman breaks off a piece of brick wall and throws it at Don and Nobody getting hit by it. Stockman then tells a joke, "If I kill you, am I guilty of murder after all? I've killed nobody." With the police on the way, Stockman decides to flee. He tries to do a parting shot, but something malfunctions, causing his arm to explode. His OS turns on to its emergency systems, and then he grabs Raph to take with him. Nobody pulls out a rocket launcher and tells Don to go help his brothers, and he'll stop Stockman. Don agrees, and he heads off. Nobody steps in front of Stockman and aims his rocket launcher, but Stockman reminds him that he will kill Raph if he shoots, causing Nobody to lay down the weapon. A police helicopter arrives, and Stockman drops Raph off the roof before shooting the laser at Nobody, which he does dodge. The chopper opens fire on Stockman, but he activates a booster out of his anus. I mean, just look at this image, which gives him enough of a boost to grab the helicopter, but he shifts its weight so much that the gunner flies out to his death. But Stockman's escape attempt is halted by the fact that he's so heavy the helicopter crashes, but it does crash into a bunch of police cars, causing a huge explosion. Stockman, who's now smoking, walks away from the wreckage. Don, having gotten everyone else to safety and sent them off, heads back to Nobody and Raph, having to avoid a bunch of police. Don finds Nobody, who tells him that he failed to save Raph, angering Don. Nobody does inform him, though, that he looked for a body and found nothing, so he might have survived. He suggests that they go back to Casey's place, assuming Raph would have gone there if he came too. Don convinces him that they should do one more sweep. Stockman collapses in the sewers as his regeneration system starts working. And ultimately, we see one image of Raph being captured and strapped to a gurney with wires connected to him. We then see Stockman's right arm regenerating. He scans his system and sees that his regeneration program is largely autonomous now, being able to make repairs independently of him. It also seems to have gained a creativity, as his new arm is actually an improvement over the first one. Casey hangs up the phone, apparently talking to Nobody, who told him that he went through the police files and there was no info on Raph. Leo suspects a cover-up, and nobody is now looking into that as a possibility. Don has an interest in finding Stockman to see what he has been up to, as he couldn't have built this robot in prison. Our group heads out to find Stockman, and we see a group of 3 agents break into the apartment to search it while they're gone. April and Casey's tenant, Mr. Bronze, hears a sound upstairs and goes to investigate finding the agents. Instead of identifying themselves, the agents just attack him, and Mr. Bronze manages to take them out. He interrogates one of them, seemingly having some kind of psychic powers. Leo, Don, Mike, and Casey are looking for Stockman in the sewers. They hear a tapping on a pipe and head towards the noise, where they find Stockman. He shoots a laser at them, giving him a window to flee. The group follows Stockman through a tunnel. They end up in a fairly open space with shallow water on the floor. As they spread out to look for Stockman, we see that he's standing above them holding a frayed wire. He lured them here in an attempt to try to kill them all in one go. Stockman drops the wire, but Leo manages to pin it to the wall by throwing one of his katanas. The sword conducts the electricity into the wire, which shoots out and hits Stockman, causing him to explode. The group goes to investigate the robot, and Mike finds Stockman's glasses. They look to see if there's a memory bank, to see if there's any info on Raph, but can't find one. April and Shadow have arrived back from Casey's aunt's house, and Casey's on the phone with his mom, talking about the break-in that happened yesterday, and how nothing was stolen for whatever reason. Casey mentions that his mom told them to get a dog, and April jokes about their 4 turtles, making Casey sad as Raph is still missing. Mr. Bronze, who we find out his name Lou, comes back to the apartment to talk to Casey. He tells Casey that he stopped a break-in, which was done by a group called D.A.R.P.A, which is a covert branch of the CIA, but they may be doing something else now. They found Casey and April through the robot, and they have his friend, referring to Raph. Casey asks how he knows all this, and he just vaguely answers that he has a gift for finding things out and is personally familiar with D.A.R.P.A. They're off book, so they won't make Raph's existence public at the very least. He tells Casey to gather the homies as he has a proposal for them. In the D.A.R.P.A facility, Raph manages to free himself from his restraints. He sneaks around guards when he finds himself in a room full of aliens and containment pods. One of the aliens is a Triceraton, who wakes up, but before anything happens, Raph is grabbed by a large monster with tentacles. Raph tries to fight it off, but the guards arrive and tranquilize both of them. The Turtles, Casey, and Nobody meet with Lou, and he tells them that his contacts have located the D.A.R.P.A facility where Raph is held, and he can get them in undetected, and that he can guarantee that D.A.R.P.A will not bother them when they return to New York. He explains his relationship with D.A.R.P.A. In the 50s, he was a rookie CIA agent, and D.A.R.P.A recruited him. He was part of a series of experiments meant to give the participants mental abilities. His group had 18 people in it, and they were given drugs to see if anyone would develop powers like telekinesis or telepathy. Some died, others developed powers. He gained the power to read minds and even shape people's thoughts to do what he wants them to do. He eventually left D.A.R.P.A, and he altered everyone's memories to think that he was one of the participants that died. The facility that they're going to is in Nevada, and they will leave tomorrow at 4 a.m. 3 days later, we see them arrive at the facility, and they hide their van in a dry wash. They sneak around, and we see a helicopter chasing off some OBs, or observers, as they say, trying to see what's happening at the facility. They realize that they have no way to sneak into the facility. Nobody pulls out equipment to deal with any electric or pressure sensors, when suddenly Casey, talking like Arnold Schwarzenegger, attacks a D.A.R.P.A truck and takes out both people inside of it. Apparently, since they had no idea what to do, Lou implanted in Casey's mind that he was the world's best assault team leader. But the accent is a Casey Jones original. They get in the truck and drive to the facility, but they didn't fool anybody, and 2 helicopters appear to open fire on them. They try to avoid the gunfire, but they run over a spike belt. Nobody takes out one of the helicopters with his disruptor. Apparently he was planning just to disable it, but oh well. They keep barreling ahead as the facility guards shoot at them. They crash through a fence and bail out as the truck explodes. Casey whips out a machine gun and lays down suppressive fire as the rest enter the facility as the door closes. Nobody takes out a guard, and Lou guides them through the facility. Casey busts through the sealed doors with a motorcycle, which he then shoots and takes 3 of the guards with the explosion. They break into the containment labs, and we see the potted aliens again. Lou recognizes one, calling him his old friend. They then see the Triceraton, who manages to break out of his pod, which they presume must have been damaged in the explosion that they used to break in. Lou and his friend approach, who talks down the Triceraton. The Triceraton recognizes the turtles. Lou's friend frees some of the aliens, leaving the ones who would die outside of the containment in place. They head to go get weapons and then help Raph. Apparently the guards are gathering outside for some reason. Once they get to where the weapons are, the Triceraton finds a homing beacon he brought with him that surprisingly has been activated. We then see a Triceraton force that is near Earth, and it receives a signal from the beacon. They were sent to attack the turtles, but lost Earth's signal, and a virus spread and wiped out most of their forces. Their base is in too rough shape and too low on fuel to return home, so they head for Earth. Our group gears up, and Lou's friend leads them to where Raph is, and we see that he's been put in stasis. Mike breaks him out. They grab Raph and head for the exit. The Triceraton and this mole-looking dude take out some guards, but the Triceraton then kills him, and he claims that it was the guards who did so. But they have no reason to question him for at least now. The group finds a bomb shelter, which leads out into some caves. But there's this gigantic Sarlacc-looking alien, which impales nobody with its tentacle and goes to eat him. Casey arms an explosive in nobody's bag, and he throws the bag at the creature, blowing up a large portion of it and causing a cave in and crushing it. And so, yeah, nobody's dead now. He's a fairly prominent character. I know he never appeared for large periods of time, but this is a very unceremonious way to take him out. And in case you're wondering, yeah, he's dead. Like, he never appears again, and it's confirmed that he died in Volume 4. And the weird thing is, too, nobody seems to really care. I mean, I don't understand what's going on. Maybe Jim Lawson hates nobody. Ultimately, our group sees a hole in the ceiling, so they climb out, only to see that they're surrounded by soldiers. The soldiers open fire, causing them to retreat back to the hole. They try to think of a plan when suddenly they hear an explosion. The Triceratons have now arrived and are fighting the military. The group goes to the surface, and they plan to meet at the end of the airstrip if they get separated. They run through the battle, fighting both sides when they have to. The Triceratons on the ship predict that they will lose based on what their computer program says, and since they can't return home, they decide to use the sun to slingshot themselves into the earth, hoping to kill everyone in the battle. The group arrives at the airstrip, but Lou hears the Triceraton's thoughts and tells everybody that he's a traitor. The Triceraton shoots Lou, fatally wounding him. He tells them to flee as the Triceraton ship is approaching. They tell the Triceraton that his side has given up, but he's incredulous, and he goes on a tirade as some debris lands on him, which kills him. The alien that's Lou's friend has the group help him flip a car back over, and he apparently knows of a weapon in the facility that can stop the Triceraton ship, so he's heading in to use it. Leo offers to go with him, but he refuses and tells him to flee. Leo argues, but he shoots him with pressurized air and drives off. The group leaves, and we see Lou in the car with his alien friend. He states that he planted false memories of his death in their minds, and that once they escape, he's going to erase their memories of the whole events that happened, as it's safer that way. The weapon that the alien wants to use apparently is called an interphasic cannon, which can make the Triceraton ship phase harmlessly through the Earth and re-solidify within the Earth's core, where it will melt. The Turtles and Casey flee as the Triceraton ship approaches Earth. There's an explosion that seems to disintegrate them, but they wake up in the apartment. Shadow is older again, looking like a kid now, instead of a toddler. Leo still has some vague memory of everything that happened, even though Casey doesn't. Shadow goes to Leo asking to be picked up, seemingly trying to comfort him, and he looks out the window trying to remember. We see Lou walking away and looking up at the apartment, silently telling Leonardo goodbye. And so, yeah, that was the entirety of Volume 2. Honestly, I thought everything with Stockman was a bit underwhelming. It seems like it was intended to be a longer story, but it got shortened after the fact. Stockman attacks April once, and she's sent away and doesn't really reappear again. And then they beat Stockman way too easily with the wire. But the last portion at the D.A.R.P.A facility was batshit crazy fun, and I enjoyed every second of it, even if it will have no narrative weight going forward since their memory was erased. But that's my main problem. In a lot of ways, this feels more like a side story than a main story. I'm glad to see Jim Lawson writing, and I just wish that more happened and that any of it really mattered. Hey, just wanted to do a quick outro and wanted to thank anybody who's been checking out and enjoying this series. If you like this video, tune in within the next month or so. I'll have part 3 coming out, which will cover volume 4 of the Mirage comics, and it'll be the final part of Mirage. And we'll finally answer the greatest mystery that has been ongoing in this series so far: what happened to Mirage volume 3. And so I hope to see you guys again soon. And for now, this is Chucklehead Renaissance fading away into the night.